Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Easiest click of my life. True story, history hit video, awesome. First Vikings on England. Or, first Viking attack on England. Well, same thing, right? Right? Let's go. Preemptive like. Original link to the video, top of the description. Below that, link to the Discord. We'd love to have you. And let's go. My name's Connor, if you're new. I like to watch things and learn. Learning time. Ooh.
Lindisfarne, one of the most picturesque and tranquil locations in England, but also the setting for one of its most calamitous events.
On the 8th of June 793, the peace of Holy Island was shattered as ships hoved into view on the horizon, ran aground and emptied themselves of a vast army of heathen men. No compunction about killing monks and shedding blood. Lindisfarne became the subject of a Viking attack that's often used to mark the beginning of the Great Viking Age that would see Northmen spread across the whole of Europe. It's entered myth.
I've been looking away a lot, but I have heard everything, and believe me, I'd rewind if I didn't.
And legend, but what do we really know about that day?
Ooh, nice grass. Oh my god. I just spit on my freaking keyboard. I was so excited. Look at that grass.
I'm Matt Lewis, a medieval historian, and I've come here to the stunning coast of what was Northumbria to retrace the steps of those early Viking raiders. The attack on Lindisfarne sent a shockwave through Christian Europe at the time and is still considered a pivotal moment in English history today, the beginning of the Viking Age. It even entered popular culture, with the attack being dramatised recently in the popular TV series Vikings. In the series, the assault is led by the semi-legendary figure of Ragnar Lothbrok, which definitely isn't what really happened. What do contemporary sources actually say about the attack? And what can they reveal about the attitudes, beliefs, and fears of the people who wrote them?
The year 793 had begun with portents of doom that terrified the monks of Lindisfarne. They'd seen visions and experienced storms that they knew meant something. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a great record of Anglo-Saxon England kept by monks in various regions, records of early 793. Dire forewarnings were come over the land of the Northumbrians and miserably terrified the folk. There were excessive whirlwinds and lightning, and fiery dragons were seen flying in the air. To these tokens followed a great famine, and a little after that, in the same year, the harrying of the heathen men lamentably destroyed God's church in Lindisfarne by means of plunder and slaughter. The Vikings arrived on dragon-prowed ships. These were the dragons that the monks feared they'd seen flying through the sky. If they'd known what terror these dragons really brought, they'd have been even more scared.
This wasn't really the first Viking incursion to hit English shores. In 789, 4 years earlier, 3 ships of Northmen landed on the coast of Wessex and reportedly killed the King's Reeve, the local official. But the attack on really the first Viking incursion to hit English shores. In 789, 4 years earlier, 3 ships of Northmen landed on the coast of Wessex and reportedly killed the King's Reeve, the local official. But the attack on Lindisfarne was so devastating because it struck at one of England's most important religious centres, the burial place of the revered St Cuthbert. From the perspective of the Vikings, the settlement here was a soft target.
This harbour is believed to be the most likely spot where the Vikings made their landing, although it would have looked very
All right, that's so freaking cool. And why is there, regardless of the fort, it's odd that there's just one outcrop, a little hill right there. Anyways,
likely spot where the Vikings made their landing, although it would have looked very different then. The sea came much closer to the priory that they were going to attack. and Lindisfarne Castle didn't exist. That's a mid-16th century addition to protect this region against the Scots. In 793, the monks were completely at the mercy of their pagan attackers.
The objective of the attackers is made clear from the sources. This wasn't an army of conquest like the later Viking forces of the 9th century. The raiding force may only have been made up of a few dozen men. They weren't looking for land. They were grabbing anything of value that they could take back to Scandinavia.
On the 8th of June, the Vikings burst into Lindisfarne Priory, shattering the peace. They went from room to room, robbing, stealing everything they could find, killing anyone that got in their way. As the monks tried to hide their precious books that they were so proud of, they realised that wasn't what the Vikings wanted. They wanted the gold and the silver that was on the altar, and they wanted the humans as their slaves.
The men who attacked Lindisfarne were clearly well-armed warriors, but their pagan religion and total disregard for Christians magnified the terror of the brutal assault. It's hard to overstate the fear created by men willing to attack the most sacred of spots. A later medieval source lamented that they trampled the holy places with polluted steps, dug up the altars and seized all the treasures of the holy church.
The Vikings took.
It's interesting. How do I word this? It seems like with, you know, more Christian, you know, people who believed similar to what you did, and you were attacked by those people, then you could have some sort of peace of mind that they wouldn't do the most horrible stuff. But knowing that these people don't give a crap makes it extra terrifying. And that's, I don't know if that makes me think whether that just
Everything they could get their hands on. Gold, silver, crosses, jewel-encrusted cups, anything of value that the monks might have. And they herded up the people as well, because they had value to the Vikings. Alcuin of York would record of the attack. The church of St. Cuthbert is spattered with the blood of the priests of God, stripped of all its treasures and left unprotected from these plundering pagans. Lindisfarne Priory that we can visit today is a 12th century replacement of what was originally here. The place that the Vikings attacked at the end of the 8th century would have been a wooden building surrounded by the buildings that the monks lived and worked in. But it's believed to have been on the same site as the new Lindisfarne Priory. Archaeological finds point in that direction, particularly the existence of this Saxon well, right at the heart of Lindisfarne Priory.
One thing that seems outrageous about this attack is the carrying off of defenceless monks into slavery. It's something...
I wonder how they dug the wells. You know, with just kind of going down with a shovel. What kind of shovel?
Is the carrying off of defenceless monks into slavery. It's something the scene in Vikings captures quite well, but the idea that only Norsemen did this is a myth. Slavery was part of life in both Anglo-Saxon England and Scandinavia at this time, so there was nothing particularly unique about the Vikings taking human captives. Still, for monks used to the routine of a quiet religious life at this isolated priory, the prospect of being carried across the seas into slavery in an unknown heathen land must have been petrifying.
As the attack on the church ended, many of the monks lay dead in pools of blood inside the church buildings and all around outside. Some were clapped in chains to be taken away as
Probably
slaves
the lucky ones.
to these heathen men. Others were brought down here to the seaside, but would make it no further. Simeon, a monk at Durham, recorded some of the monks they killed, some they carried off in chains, most of them they stripped naked, insulted and cast out of the doors, and some they drowned in the sea. The attack would leave all of England in a state of shock. These brutal heathen men had arrived and ransacked and murdered in God's church, stolen God's property and killed God's holy men.
As news of the attack on Lindisfarne spread across England and then Europe, It's not hard to imagine the panic it would have caused. What might surprise you, though, is how people sought to prevent such a disaster in the future.
In the shock and aftermath of the brutal attack here at Lindisfarne, all of England tried to rationalise what had happened and, perhaps more important, to work out how to stop it happening ever again. Alcuin of York penned a letter containing his thoughts on the event. His initial idea was that this was the outcome of the sins of those who lived there. He thought that the monks must have been living unholy, unpious lives that had angered God and
That's convenient. Oh, I'm lazy. Well, they probably had it coming, you know. God wasn't happy. Sucks for them.
caused him to send this against them. He went on, either this is the beginning of greater tribulations, or else the sins of the inhabitants have called it upon them. Truly, it has not happened by chance, but it is a sign that it was well merited by someone. He thought that someone must be to blame. Someone had angered God in this place to bring down this horror upon them.
Imagine being around someone like that, who just is nuts. And it's just, there has to be a reason. I know there's a reason. It's like,
Someone had angered God in this place to bring down this horror upon them. And he thought that they should continue to resist Viking attacks wherever they could. His final piece of advice for how to avoid future Viking attacks said, "Consider carefully, brothers, and examine diligently, lest perchance this unaccustomed and unheard of evil was merited by some unheard of evil practice. Consider the dress, the way of wearing the hair, the
how about protecting and fortifying against a future invasion? Ah, God, this isn't... I would have thought that people with this mindset would kind of die out, but I'm not saying it's a genetic mindset, so I guess that doesn't make sense. You can't die out if it's... But you're going to prepare for nothing because you just think it's something that you did to anger God rather than that there is another army invading you and you need to protect against it.
luxurious habits of the princes and people. Alcuin thought that people living to excess had annoyed God and brought down vengeance upon all of them, and that they should stop these things. The advice sounds a little bit crazy, though. He's essentially saying, cut your hair to save yourself from Viking attacks.
Exactly. It's like, oh, dang it, why were we invaded? Not because there's another army who's taking advantage of your poorly defended area. You wore your hair wrong.
And history would show cutting your hair was no defence against the Vikings.
In fact,
oh, they have a new
the
haircut.
Northmen were
Guys,
only
back on
just
the
getting
boat.
started. Raids would increase in scale and regularity over the course of the 9th century until the arrival of the Great Heathen Army in 865, which heralded a new chapter of conquest and settlement. The belief that the Vikings were an instrument of God's wrath to be dealt with by more piety would persist until eventually Anglo-Saxon kings like Alfred the Great demonstrated that they could also be pushed back through military force and diplomacy.
Those monks who'd survived had little choice but to abandon Lindisfarne for a while. They dug up the remains of their beloved St Cuthbert and took his coffin with them as they travelled around seeking a new home. Monks and religion would return to Lindisfarne, as this 12th century priory proves, but the Viking attack of 793 had set a template of terror that would haunt England for decades.
I hope you enjoyed that video. If you're a fan of the Viking era, take a look at our episode on the real Last Kingdom, exploring the history behind the hit Netflix series. It's on the channel now.
Great video as always. Love History Hit. That monk guy is nuts. Hope you guys are all doing well. If not, you'll be good soon, don't worry. And I'll check you guys, I'll see you guys next time, all right? Bye, guys.